And there's a saying that a person who lives their life according to emotions lives an effed up life. And I guess, are there any good emotions in trading, or how do we block those out when those emotions come up if they aren't any good?
I would say all emotions. It depends how how you look at it, right? Are you prepared to accept? Because it's going to happen, right? You're going to have emotions, good emotions, bad emotions. One, I guess, is before you act, you're going to have different emotions. So, for example, this morning we had a target. I had a target to take some euro short, right? Been in this for a while. Finally hit the level, 119.70. So that was the training, the part say, I'm ready to do this. This is, what I'm gonna do. But then I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, I was like, this looks like it still wants to go, right? Now we're just starting to break down. Now I'm gonna stay in the trade. Well, that emotion right there of, man, I feel good, I feel confident. That from experience, I know that's probably tells me that I should stick with my plan, because now I know what's going on, right? Now I feel great. Well, there's more variables than that. Maybe just take off part of the position, right? And then, okay, now I feel good. Now I can, now I feel better. Because, man, if I would have stayed in that position completely, even though we got to the target, and then it would have turned around and ripped, right, the next day or two, I would have had very bad emotion. I would have very bad feeling and discouraged, right? Now that's going to happen too. That's okay. I know to deal with it, but it comes from understanding those emotions. So like this morning, again, we got to that level. Now I'm feeling really good and really confident. Well, historically for me, that's a sign that you should probably go against that emotion. If that, you know what I mean? Because now I'm super confident. When you're super confident is when you're going to get knocked down. So there's one way to understand your emotions. So you can't get rid of them, right? We're not computers. You're going to have to deal with them. So that's my 2 cents on emotions.
Steve's smiling over there.
Yeah, well, okay. But only because Jamie saved me having to do my long speech on what I think. I'm in complete agreement. So when I first came into working with traders 2005, in the early days and even into 06, I was bombarded with requests as kind of a new guy into this sort of trading psychology world to help traders to trade without emotions. And I was like, well, how's that going to happen? Without going into brain surgery and starting to remove parts of your brain. How are we going to remove them? It's part of the human condition. So, my work, particularly as it's evolved over the years, and we know this from neuroscience now, I guess the science backs up what we maybe know intuitively, you can't get rid of them. Emotions are part of the human experience, and we have them because they serve a purpose. They provide information, the way I frame it to my clients is emotions are data. If you're feeling confidence, why is that? If you're feeling fear, what is the fear? Be specific. Is it a fear of loss? Is it a fear of missing out? And why might that be? What could be the message behind it? So when I'm working with clients, we're really trying to develop emotional awareness. So be aware of what you're feeling. As soon as you've got an awareness of emotion, it's a bit like you get a bit of distance from it. And the way I would kind of, as a metaphor, think about, you can be in the river, so you're going where the river takes you, or you could be above the river, maybe in a helicopter looking down, so you can still see what's going on, but the experience is different. And I think once we start to be aware of our emotions and we start to monitor and notice them, we can be in that observer perspective such that we're having the emotion, but by having that bit of distance, we get the flexibility and the space to actually then ask ourselves, well, why is that emotion showing up for me right now? Is there anything I need to do to attend to that? Is there some data here that maybe I want to utilize or not? And then it gives me that flexibility to either maybe go with the emotion-driven response or not to and do something different. The challenge, if we get into emotions of good or bad, positive or negative, is if we frame it as bad or negative, we'll create an aversion. So once we notice maybe a sense of some fear, we try to avoid it. So if I'm in a trade and I'm in a losing position and I get this strong sense of the fear of losing, the way that I can avoid feeling that fear of losing is to stay in that losing trade. So now in the short term, I avoid the fear. I avoid the fear as such, or the feeling of fear, but I stay in the losing trade. Now in the short term, I feel better, but in the long term, as that trade goes against me further and further and further, I could be exposed to significantly more pain. Boredom's another one. Boredom in the short term. How do I get rid of feeling bored? I'll place some trades. So the action of placing trades reduces in the short term the feeling of being bored, but I might end up with a load of bad trades in my book that now cost me money. So I think that historically, when we think about emotions as good, bad, negative, positive, is the danger is that we create this kind of aversive tendencies. And when we look at a lot of unhelpful trading behavior, quite often people are trying to avoid feeling something uncomfortable. It was actually what we want to be able to do is get good at feeling the uncomfortable. So be aware of it, acknowledge it, work with it. And then primarily the goal is to be able to have the emotion, but without that emotion having you, which is the phrase that's often used quite a lot in kind of the psychological world. So it's not so much about getting rid of them, it's about being aware of them, but still maintaining the ability to take effective action, even though you're feeling a particular emotion. Which means if we can get that bit of distance, if we can notice, I'm having the feeling of confidence, I'm having a feeling of the fear of missing out, I'm having a feeling of boredom. Once we notice it as a feeling we're having, we can start to change our relationship to the emotion, and then what happens next. So we can become a bit more responsive and a little bit less reactive, perhaps.
Yeah, and that, like, all that, like what you just said, goes into, the training, right? Training yourself to, understand, like, first accept that you're going to have emotion, and then understand what they mean, right? As you said, data, taking that data in, processing it, and then using it to your advantage.
Exactly.
A lot of people fail, not because they have bad, signals or analysis or whatever. That's the small part, right? It's because they don't deal with their emotions and process them correctly, and then you have no chance after that. So that's the biggest part for sure.